Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O my Lord, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. And then we can do this one together. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Naranarayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashtapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay, so today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19. Let's see, texts 31 and 32. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Grace.
Oh, yeah, you're here today. Yeah, ooh, it's very cold. Okay, so we're reading Canto 1, Chapter 19, texts 31 and 32. So we'll start with 31, obviously. Prashantamashi namakunta medasam. Prasantamasi namakunta medasam. Munim Ripo Bhagavato Bhupetya. Munim Ripo Bhagavato Bhupetya. Pranamya Mordana Vahita Krit. Pranamya Mordna Vahita Kritanjalir. Pranamya Mordna Vahita Kritanjalir. Natva Gira Sunritayan Vaprichat. Natva Gira Sunritayan Vaprichat. Okay, we'll do the
We are
synonyms.
not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. I knew I was forgetting to do something. All right, hold on one second. Let's see here. Share. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. I'll go through the Sanskrit one more time just so that. All right. Prashantamasi namakunta medasam. Munim Nripo Bhagavato Bhupetya. Pranamya Mordna Bahita Kritanjalir. Natva Gira Sunritayan Viprichat. Okay, and then the synonyms together. Prashantam, perfectly pacified. Asinam, sitting. Akunta, without hesitation. Medasam, one who has sufficient intelligence. Munim, unto the great sage. Nirpa, the king, Maharaj Parikshit. Bhagavata, the great devotee. Abhyupetya, approaching him. Pranamya, bowing down. Mordna, his head. Avahita, properly. Krita Anjali, with folded hands. Natva, politely. Gira, by words. Sunritaya, in sweet voices. Anva Prichat, inquired. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The sage Sri Shukadev Goswami sat perfectly pacified, intelligent, and ready to answer any question without hesitation. The great devotee Maharaj Parikshit approached him, offered his respects by bowing before him, and politely inquired with sweet words and folded hands. Purport. The gesture now adopted by Maharaj Parikshit of questioning a master is quite befitting in terms of scriptural injunctions. The scriptural injunction is that one should humbly approach a spiritual master to understand the transcendental science. Maharaj Parikshit was now prepared for meeting his death, and within the very short time of 7 days, he was to know the process of entering the kingdom of God. In such important cases, one is required to approach a spiritual master. There is no necessity of approaching a spiritual master unless one is in need of solving the problems of life. One who does not know how to put questions before the spiritual master has no business seeing him. And the qualification of the spiritual master is perfectly manifested in the person of Shukadev Goswami. Both the spiritual master and the disciple, namely Sri Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, attained perfection through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadev Goswami learned Srimad Bhagavatam from his father, Vyasadeva, but he had no chance to recite it. Before Maharaj Parikshit, he recited Srimad Bhagavatam and answered the questions of Maharaj Parikshit unhesitatingly, and thus both the master and the disciple got salvation. Okay, and then text 32. Parikshit uvacha aho vayam brahman satsevya kshatra bandhava kripayatiti rupena bhavad bhistirtaka krita. The fortunate King Parikshit said, O Brahmana, by your mercy only you have sanctified us, making us like unto places of pilgrimage. All by your presence here as my guest. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty become eligible to serve the devotee. Purport. Saintly devotees like Shukadev Goswami generally do not approach worldly enjoyers, especially those in royal orders. Maharaj Prachaparudra was a follower of Lord Chaitanya, but when he wanted to see the Lord refused to see him because he was a king. For a devotee who desires to go back to Godhead, two things are strictly prohibited: worldly enjoyers and women. Therefore, devotees of the standard of Shukadev Goswami are never interested in seeing kings. Maharaj Parikshit was, of course, a different case. He was a great devotee, although a king, and therefore Shukadev Goswami came to see him in his last stage of life. Maharaj Parikshit, out of his devotional humility, felt himself an unworthy descendant of his great Kshatriya forefathers, although he was as great as his predecessors. The unworthy sons of the royal orders are called Kshatriya Bandhavas, as the unworthy sons of the Brahmanas are called Dvija Bandhus or Brahma Bandhus. Maharaj Parikshit was greatly encouraged by the presence of Shukadev Goswami. He felt himself sanctified by the presence of the great saint, whose presence turns any place into a place of pilgrimage. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, just to actually, what I'd like to discuss today is the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple. But just really quick, want to touch on a couple of points in text 32. Yeah, for a devotee who desires to go back to God, two things are strictly prohibited: worldly enjoyers and women. Obviously, half the world is composed of women, and half our movement, maybe more. Prabhupada said that when you see in a religious ceremony, he said you see more women than men because at any religious function. It's in one of the purports in the teachings of Queen Kunti. And he says, because it's actually easier, I don't remember exactly how he words it, but he says something to the effect that women are more simple-hearted, so that it's easier, they more easily surrender to the Lord. And so we see so many examples of exalted women, obviously the gopis who are the most exalted, just simply are in love with Krishna and um, have attained that perfection in their relationship with Krishna. So he's speaking about people who are seeing women as an object of enjoyment, right? Worldly enjoyers in women. And so we see Prabhupada in his own example had many female disciples, and they all reported that they felt like Prabhupada was like a father or grandfather to them. Um, and so he's very affectionate to all of his disciples. And we obviously aren't good because we don't want to take statements out of context, right? The hermeneutical principles require that we put things into context. So we don't want to take one sentence out and say, all right, like Jonava, you and I are going to have to leave this class now because we're not supposed, devotees aren't supposed to, have any association with women. But just that, and who, I'm sorry, I don't know any other women that are on the call right now. There may be others. But just to say that mentality of trying to enjoy objects of sense gratification. And we see in the Bhagavatam, I think it's in the fourth canto, where it's talking about that when people are in family life and they're trying to enjoy sense gratification with their family rather than trying to come together and create an ashram and serve together and help each other go back to Godhead, there's that contrast there. And in the Bhagavatam, it specifically says that men and women both should see that the family is not just there to be enjoyed, but is actually the property of Krishna and should come together to create a spiritual ashram. So I just wanted to point that out in case anybody was confused about what Prabhupada was saying here. So Maharaj Parikshit, he's just being humble. He's obviously a very great devotee. As Prabhupada says, it's different with the case of Maharaj Parikshit. He was a different case. And so Shukadev Goswami seeing it, of course, Maharaj Parikshit at this point has renounced everything, right? He's given up his kingdom, all his wealth and riches. He's come just as a humble and Jiva soul coming to the banks of a transcendental river, ready to give up his life, ready to take up spiritual life, although he was already a great devotee. And so, of course, Shukadev Goswami, it's the idea is that the sages and the saints, they're not meant to mix closely with people who are in that mode of enjoying riches and things like that. But when it comes to teaching Krishna consciousness, that's a different consideration. It doesn't matter what kind of ashram somebody's in, as long as they want to learn about Krishna consciousness, then the advanced devotees, they'll come and teach. The gurus will come and teach those who are interested in being serious about Krishna consciousness. So that's why in the previous purport, I want to discuss, because Maharaj Parikshit has now decided to take shelter of a guru and ask him how to make progress to go back home, back to Godhead. For Maharaj Parikshit is, only has 7 days to work all of that out. But again, it's not like he's completely starting from scratch because he is a devotee in a line of great devotees. But since we're going to be talking about that today, or since we're at that verse, I think it's important for us to understand and discuss what it means and why we should take shelter of a spiritual master and how to do so. Many of you in the audience have already taken shelter of a spiritual master. Some of you haven't, perhaps, and want to know the process. But even if everyone in the audience does know the process, it's always good to go over it again, because sometimes we'll learn something, we'll do something, and then we kind of don't think about it again. So even to be able to explain it to others, we want to know what the process is. Okay, so there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna speaks to Arjuna that talks about how to learn the truth, right?
Last year also same time, same question, same thing happened. Mani Prabhu is also there, I think. Tadvidya Pranipatena is right.
Yeah. Yep. Same question, question.
Conversation in your class only. Similar question, similar situation. And you asked and we said this verse. It's like maybe in this different verse also same thing is there.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Okay, good. So now you know this verse really well from the Gita. But we
mm,
didn't really we discussed it maybe to some extent, but I want to go over a little bit more.
okay.
Did we talk about it extensively, that verse, or did I just touch on it?
That is 1 year back. I do not remember
Oh,
completely.
okay. So I've got a whole year. We got a whole year between us. You have a good memory. Okay, so then the question is after that year has gone by, does everyone know the English to that verse? Sometimes I ask him, and the Sanskrit everyone knows very well, but not always the English. So what's the Sanskrit and the English? I heard a little something, but I don't know if
Yeah,
the voice is coming
yeah, Mani
through.
Prabhu. I thought Mani Prabhu is saying it.
Okay, Mani, did you want to say the Sanskrit and English for 434?
Just no, Mataji. I thought I remembered, but okay, no,
Okay,
not the one. Yeah,
so see, it's good we're going over it again. So
yeah, so, yeah.
Jonathan, you have such a good memory. Can you tell us the Sanskrit and English?
Sanskrit, I will tell. English, you will be telling. Anyway, you opened, right?
What?
English, you will be telling. Sanskrit, I will tell.
Okay, and see, this is why I'm repeating this thing that we talked about a year ago because it's important. It's important for us to also know the English. So go ahead and do the Sanskrit.
तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपाध्यक्षन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः.
Okay, do you know any of the English?
Submissively surrendering unto the Guru and asking him. I mean, I
You know
think,
the basic
yeah,
concept.
basic concept,
Okay.
not in detail.
Okay. So the English, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master,
Because
inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The
mm,
self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth.
mm,
All right, so that's the English for that verse. And I'm going to go a little bit into the Sanskrit and talk about this. Um, it's important, you know, all over the place. We see Prabhupada often talking about how um, people who approach a guru just out of fashion. And at the time in the 60s, when Prabhupada came to America, it was a really huge fashion that these Indian gurus were coming and people were just taking shelter of these gurus. And it wasn't really taking shelter. Prabhupada said they were taking it on as a fashion, just like someone keeps a dog. That's what Prabhupada describes in a few places. Just like someone keeps a dog, they keep a spiritual master. And so in one class he was giving, that he was saying when you approach a spiritual master, you approach submissively and you ask questions. But he said, just like when you keep a dog, he was imitating like, come, come, like, he's telling the dog, come, come. So you don't take shelter of the guru. You don't take on a guru as just like an ornament or a fashion and just say, oh, I've got this Indian guru, here he is. And then you come, come. But there's a whole mentality, and Prabhupada says this, the gesture now adopted by Maharaj Parikshit is quite befitting, right? So how we approach the spiritual master. So again, the Bhagavad Gita, it's just such a fundamental principles of practicing Krishna consciousness, or learning how to come to that point where you want to take up transcendence. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita, the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita is to get people to the point to say, look, there's all these other dharmas, there's all these other things you can do. In your life. You can follow Varnashram as your end goal. You can do all these rituals. You can do Jnana Yoga, all these things. But in the end, he just says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, just surrender unto me, give up all these other dharmas. And so then the Bhagavatam starts with, now that you've done that, let's talk about bhakti. But in the meantime, he's giving these kind of the methods for coming to that point of learning about transcendence. And so he's saying just try to learn the truth by approaching the spiritual master. So I want to go over that purport in the Bhagavad Gita talk about that a bit. And again, the reason why I'm going over this is because we now see we've got this setup, what leads up to the Bhagavatam being spoken, all the lead up to it, what happened, the history. And now we've gotten to the point where Maharaj Parikshit says, okay, I'm going to die. Tell me what to do. But he says it in the proper way. He approaches a spiritual master. He's being submissive. He's inquiring from him, how can I go back to Godhead? And so because now this is what the rest of the Bhagavatam is, it's Shukadev Goswami giving that knowledge to Maharaj Parikshit. And of course we see stories within stories within stories, but that's the overall situation that's happening in the Bhagavatam. So since that's happening, it's great that, we talk about how does one do this? How does one approach a spiritual master and go back to Godhead like Maharaj Parikshit did? And Prabhupada's saying they both benefited from this. They both benefited from having this conversation. And so for us, not only do we want to learn how to properly approach a spiritual master and maintain that relationship properly and learn how to make progress, but as we make advancement, eventually we should also become gurus, whether it's a Shiksha guru, a Diksha guru, or whatever, a Parthapradarshika guru, someone who just introduces a person to the path, a mentor. We want to be gurus because if there's one thing lacking in this world, it's proper gurus for I mean, we have gurus in our movement, but the number of people who need to take shelter compared to the number of people who are able to give shelter or willing to give shelter is disproportionate. So the more gurus we have, the more territory we can cover with being able to guide people properly in their spiritual life. So we should all make ourselves qualified. And Prabhupada spoke about that very often. You can look it up in the database, how often he spoke about telling everybody, please become a guru, please teach this science to others, right? So we want to take on that responsibility. We don't want to just become comfortable in our own spiritual life, but we want to help others because they deserve to be helped just as much as we deserve to be helped. So it's good to know these things. It's good to learn them and understand them. And when the time comes, however many years it is, and I can actually not even say years, even in our beginning stages, we can at least help somebody learn about Krishna, right? Even if we're just in our beginning stages of approaching a spiritual master and learning from him, whatever we actually have learned so far, we can tell to others. So when people come to our temples and our preaching centers and any of our programs, or we meet anybody on the street or at the store, we can tell them about Krishna. Prabhupada said any child can tell someone about Krishna. And so Prabhupada really encouraged us to just go and teach others about Krishna consciousness. So in this purport, Prabhupada says the path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. And then he says, no one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. So you can't just be a self-authorized guru, right? Since you want to be it's guru to disciple to guru to disciple, right? There's a disciplic succession, and that has to carry on. And so once we learn from the spiritual master, then we can in the future teach others ourselves. There. Okay. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. Now, of course, we know there's people out there who want to become gurus just to get followers and wealth and things like that, and they want to be like get that name and fame. But even within our own tradition and even in our own disciplic succession, we have to make sure that we are not manufacturing our own process, that everything we say is backed by Shastra. Everything we say is backed by our previous acharyas, by our guru, and so on. So we really should learn, study scrutinizingly study Prabhupada's books. I'm just kind of touching on some points. It is getting a little late from this purport. He says, nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. So we have to take shelter of a guru, because some people claim, well, I could just take shelter of Prabhupada, right? I could just read his books and take shelter of him and I'm good. But that's not how Prabhupada explains it. One cannot just read books. And of course, Prabhupada's books aren't ordinary, but still, Prabhupada is always encouraging us to approach a person and take shelter of them. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. Right? So you have to, Prabhupada says later on, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Right? So when we say absurd, when Prabhupada says absurd, he really means just ridiculous questions. Like I think there's a story, just to give an example of someone asking Prabhupada, if the guru knows everything, how many windows are in the Empire State Building, right? It's just a ridiculous question. It's not a question about how to make advancement in spiritual life. So when it says that these are seers of the truth or knowers of the truth, right? The self-realized in this verse, they're tattva darshina. They're seers of the truth, of the tattvas. That tattva means what? What does tattva mean? Because there's different kinds of truth. So this kind of truth means a specific thing. What does it mean? Do you know, Karuna, what tattva literally means? Like what the...
Some difference of things. Like when I do Odivas, there is some that have so many varieties. I think that on stuff.
Okay, so different things. So what kind of different things?
Some grass, some vines, some.
Okay, that's in a yajna, right?
That one.
What about the bigger picture? What about like the whole universe? Like what are the tattvas of the universe? When in this verse, when it talks about darshina, they've seen the truth. And by the way, to say that someone has seen something in this culture means they've understood it. They've actually experienced it, right? So there's gyan and vigyan, there's knowledge and there's realized knowledge. And so they've realized these tattvas. Does anyone know on Zoom what tattva means and what it's referring to? Anyone out there have a thought about
No,
tattva?
no.
No, okay. So tattva means a fundamental truth.
Yes.
Yeah. Tattva means a fundamental truth. And so the fundamental truths means or absolute truths. It means they're not relative. They don't change. Relative means, for example, I think I've given this example many times before, but if I ask you, is 68 degrees cold or warm? What would you say? Is it cold or warm? Is it warm? If it's 90 degrees outside and I come into a room that's 68 degrees, do I feel warm? I feel cold, right? If it's 30 degrees outside and I walk into a room that's 68 degrees, do I feel warm or cold? So it's a relative truth. It's relative, meaning it depends on something else. Whether or not 68 degrees is hot or cold depends on where you just came from. It depends, right? If there's a contrast. But a fundamental truth is something that it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Krishna is God. Krishna, Vishnu Tattva. Vishnu Tattva means it's a fundamental category that never changes. It doesn't matter whether it's hot or cold, whether the universe is being destroyed or created. Krishna is always God. It doesn't matter the circumstances. He's always God. We may not know that we may not see it or we may not know it, but that truth doesn't change. And so there's these fundamental categories, these tattvas, that are like Vishnu Tattva, Jiva Tattva, right? These are fundamental categories. We are always souls. We may not know it because we're covered in a body, but we are always souls. That never changes. It'll never, as Krishna says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, right? So the soul is eternal, regardless of anything else that's going on. It's an absolute fundamental truth. So sometimes people get these truths mixed up. They think, I'm God. That's the absolute truth. The fundamental truth is actually I'm God. I've just forgotten. Right. So they think Krishna is an ordinary jiva, right? When he descends to this world, he says, fools deride me. So when he descends to this world, someone may think, oh, he's a human being. So that's people who get these categories mixed up, these fundamental categories, they get them confused. But the seers, these tattva darshina, they don't confuse the categories. They've experienced them. They know Krishna's God. They know that the jiva is eternal. They know that our true identity is a soul. And so they are qualified to teach us. And they're qualified to teach us because they know the right thing to teach. So he's saying, approach these people, approach the people who have understood the categories. So that's the Tattvadarshina. Try to learn from them. Pariprashnena. Prashnani means question, right? And pati means like around or all or like this, like just ask all the questions. Prabhupada says by submissive inquiries. Pati is something like peri in English, which is like we have the words perimeter, it means to go around, to measure around. And so it's sometimes it's translated as all, so all inquiries. And of course, Prabhupada puts in the word submissive to show that not only do you have to ask these questions, but you have to ask them submissively. So since it's already 8:33, I'm just going to read something really quick from the Science of Self-Realization, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. Excuse me. Prabhupada says in the Science of Self-Realization, this is in chapter 2. The first process is that of surrender. We have to find an exalted person and willingly surrender before him. The Shastras enjoin that before we take a guru, we study him carefully to find out whether we can surrender to him. We should not accept a guru suddenly out of fanaticism. That is very dangerous. The guru should also study the person who wants to become a disciple to see if he is fit. So just that line right there, the guru should also study the person who wants to become a disciple to see if he is fit, shows that we cannot just say, well, I'll just take shelter of Prabhupada, right? So you could have done that when he was present before us, but we want to approach a person who's currently here and can study us and we study them, and then the relationship is formed. Prabhupada said that is the way a relationship is established between the guru and the disciple. And then he says, taking on a guru is not simply a fashion. One who is serious about understanding spiritual life requires a guru. A guru is a question of necessity, for one must be very serious to understand spiritual life, God, proper action, and one's relationship with God. And then he goes on, I'll just kind of go he says, if we go to a guru simply to challenge him, we will learn nothing. So sometimes what happens, so just to summarize everything and wrap this up, the whole point of going to a guru is to learn from the guru how to make progress in spiritual life. That's the point. That's why you approach a guru. The point of approaching a guru is not to go to him to say, I have all these ideas for sense gratification. Can you please rubber stamp them with blessings? Right? So sometimes it gets turned around. Or sometimes someone goes, like Prabhupada says, they have a challenging attitude, like, oh yeah, well, what about this? What about that? Or tell me this, or what are you doing? We don't want to have this challenging attitude that's, I know better and I'm gonna show you how I know better, and I'm going to challenge to see if you know what you're talking about. We want to, of course, before we approach a guru, see whether or not they're speaking on properly. As Prabhupada says, we have to study the guru. But once we approach, we're not there to challenge. So Prabhupada says this in this purport to 434. He says, inquiries, submission, and service. Those are the three things you want when you're approaching a spiritual master. And then that exchange of knowledge will take place. So we just want to make sure that whenever we go to our spiritual master, or if we're looking for a spiritual master, when we finally do approach, that we do it with the mood of, I'm simply approaching this person to see how I can serve them, how I can learn from them, and how I can make advancement in spiritual life, rather than how can I get blessings to do whatever I want. And so this is Maharaj Parikshit. Prabhupada says the gesture now adopted by Maharaj Parikshit is quite befitting. The scriptural injunction is that one should humbly approach a spiritual master to understand the transcendental science. So now Maharaj Parikshit, this is happening in the Bhagavatam. He's properly approaching Shukadeva Goswami, and that exchange of knowledge is going to take place, and it's going to take place for the entire world to benefit. So we should take advantage and always read every day Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada has given us a gem. He's given us a treasure, and we can never repay him for that treasure that he's given us. He's basically saving us from the cycle of birth and death. He's pulling us out of the ocean of material suffering. And he's giving us the instruction manual for how to go back to Godhead. And we should see that with a sense of urgency, and we should take full advantage of it. And Prabhupada said we can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. Okay, I'll end there. I'm sorry it went so late. Any questions, comments, realizations?
I'll ask you after the class, Prabhu. I have one very big question. It takes so much time. Thank
Okay,
you.
so after the class?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, yeah, send me a text or whatever, or call me. Okay, anybody else? Any comments, questions before we end? Okay, if not, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Vanchakalpa Churvyascha Kripa Sindhu-vyeva-cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you all for joining.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.